Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 11 with Tino and Aaron. Today, we're going to be covering our starting pitching, SP1, which for us is starting pitcher 1 through 16. How's it going, Aaron?
It's going good. It's going good.
We're entering your wheelhouse here. Super excited.
We'll see. We'll see.
Any coffee thoughts for the week?
Yeah, I don't really have anything beyond what I shared earlier on our midweek pod. I haven't had any coffees the last couple of days or any experiences that were different or worth sharing. It's been kind of just grinding out the rest of the week since we talked last. So
no pun intended.
Yeah, just kind of the usual, keeping on with.
Same here. I've had some thoughts about doing some home roasting recently, and so I might dig into that a little bit. But other than that, nothing more than making a pot of coffee with 44 grams on 18 on a Barazza and 8 cups of water and drinking that pot of coffee all day. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on baseball coming back? How'd you feel when you heard?
I was surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of got off the roller coaster of the daily news cycle, and I just hadn't realized that they were that close. And so, I was just surprised, pleasantly, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's been the last couple of days. Read a few articles, try to understand, I guess, some of the major terms of the agreement, but I'm not really clear on the service time, like how that changed, if at all. So I hope it did, but I guess it's just something I'm just going to learn in time as those situations arise, like how they're handled, if it's different. That's how I learned about the CBA that we had. So I'm pleased that it's done. I'm glad that the players stood their ground. Seems like, one of the concepts I'd read was the idea with labor negotiations and these labor relationships it's not just about this deal. It's about kind of just moving it towards the middle or making progress, and then the next deal you can push it farther. And it just seemed like they had to take a hard stance this time to kind of stop the trend of the way it was going and kind of push back figuratively to kind of get a larger piece of the revenue, to get it going back that way. And then hopefully that builds upon the next one and the next one, and kind of taking a broader view. So I just, as hard as it was to set down the barrel of, if and when the season was going to start, it seems like it was the right thing to do for the union and the players, and we don't have a game without the players. So I'm glad that they were playing full, and the union, they had their money that they had saved to support the players who couldn't afford to not get paid, and they seemed like they were really prepared this time around. So I don't know, those are my immediate thoughts, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I feel the same. I think I tend to be 95% on the player's side, and I'm just glad that they got it done. I don't know that I allowed myself to think that it was possible that we wouldn't have a season, and so I just kind of assumed that we would get to a place where a certain number of games were canceled. And I think for spreadsheet purposes and record purposes and projection purposes, I'm glad there's 162 games this year. I do think there was a lot of silliness, and I don't subscribe to the idea that that the way in which they talk about player salaries and people should be thankful for playing the game, and that's, to me, a pretty tired argument. And I also think that I feel like the owners were quite out of touch as far as mostly as far as the public reaction, right? That they didn't realize that the public was going to side with the players. But it's in the rearview mirror. We're able to set our keeper dates. We're able to set our draft date. I know Matt is coming out this way to Walla Walla to visit, and anybody else in our league is welcome to come to watch the first weekend of the season, so we can move on and have kind of our biggest holiday to look forward to. Super psyched. Super psyched. All right, so with SP1, we're going to rank our top 16. We're going to talk about our favorite SP1 We'll talk a little bit about drafting as an SP1 in a redraft and what you look for, and maybe share a little bit more about what we were thinking as far as TGFBI and NFBC. And then each give one potential SP1 that we think is going to rise as far as ranking, and one potential to fall. And then we'll give our favorite prospect that we feel has SP1 potential. So how many starters did you have in your first tier?
I didn't tier these out, Tino. I just
Oh, you
have
did?
1 through 16.
Okay. Who are your top three then?
Cole, Burns, and Scherzer.
Okay. So ranking Cole above Burns is, I guess we see some experts ranking they're 1-2 on most people's eyes. What is it that put Cole above Burns for you?
Innings and track record. Their command is relatively equal, as is their walk rates. Burns has a little higher swinging strike rate, but he doesn't have the innings track record, and I think that's not insignificant. Cole was a little bit more consistent last year. Burns had a couple more blow up starts, but yeah, it's pretty close. But yeah, I have Cole number 1, and I didn't really have a lot of second thoughts about it.
Are you worried about how Cole performed after the crackdown on the sticky stuff at all?
I'm not. It seemed like most players, there was an adjustment phase, and it seemed like he adjusted by the end of the year.
So he did adjust by the end of the year. He did have a stretch of 10 starts where he gave up 31 earned runs, 12 homers, struck out 32, and walked 8, which is a lot of runs to give up in 10 starts for him. Cole is my number 1. So I did tier mine out. Cole, Scherzer, and Buehler are my first tier. I don't rank Burns until number 5. What I found in looking at the top 16 starters for me is that there are a lot of starters who this was their first year of elite performance, and this was their first year of bulk innings. And those guys, for my approach, would make me incredibly nervous spending a first or second round pick on one of those pitchers who has limited exposure to 150 plus innings. And as amazing as Burns's 167 innings were last season, it gives me pause. I understood
who was your number 3?
My number 3 is Buehler. Okay. What I saw with Walker Buehler was, as you know, because he might be your favorite pitcher. I'm not sure. I know that you like him a lot. He has 4+ pitches. He was the only starter that I saw where you could really say they had 4+ pitches. From a run value standpoint, he had the number 4 fastball in baseball, the number 11 cutter, the number 47 slider, and the number 30 curveball. So he had 4+ pitches. Batting average against was 202, 230, 190, and 175 on those 4 pitches. So you may see pitchers with, say they have three pitches that they throw, or 4 pitches that they throw, and usually what you see is 1 or 2 are plus as far as stuff and as far as results, and then the third is for show, or the third and fourth are for show to set up the others, or they have an average fastball and 2+ breaking balls. But when I look at him, I look at his mechanics. I look at the fact that he's strung together 3 full seasons from a workload standpoint. His last 3 years of ERA are 2.4, not including 2020, 2.47, 3.26, 2.62. He pitches in a big park with a great offense. To me, he's guaranteed 200 innings, 200 Ks, and 15 wins. And so he was probably my favorite pitcher, and I hadn't dug into Buehler as much as I did for this exercise, and I came away incredibly impressed. The other cool thing about Buehler is he's almost put together in a lab, in that his fastball had very little horizontal movement, And so he pitches up and down, mostly up with the fastball. And then his slider was 135% above average as far as horizontal movement goes. And so he's using the X and Y planes in a really kind of scientific manner. His cutter moved 309% more than average as far as horizontal break. So he's using the cutter and the slider to move the batter's eyes left and right, and then using the fastball to move it up and down. And I think when you have that kind of stuff and you're able to pitch with command and control, to me, it would not surprise me to see Buehler get even better this next year. So he's my number 3. Scherzer was 2. For Scherzer, most of it was just, it's Scherzer, right? Like, until he shows, kind of like Tom Brady, until he shows that he's deteriorating or in decline, you have to rank him there. I feel like he's 200, 250 strikeouts over and over and over again. And he's going to a park that's going to be very pitcher friendly and a division that does not have a lot of good offenses. So I had Cole 1, again, like you said, because of track record. I had Scherzer 2 and Buehler 3. It would not shock me if Buehler was number 1 at this time next year. So my number 4 was actually Jacob deGrom. I understand the risk associated with deGrom. I understand that he has a partially torn UCL. But every metric was completely off the charts. And so if you, as you know, if you get 150 innings from deGrom, that to me is probably worth a second round pick, right? I don't really need to describe too much of what he did. His fastball did increase from 96.9 miles an hour average in 2019 to 99.3 last year. And it makes me nervous about, his ability of his body or his arm to take that kind of stress. I felt like it was interesting that he had scrapped his curve and threw a lot fewer changeups and threw a lot more fastballs last year. 57.4% of his pitches were fastballs last year. So he's one that, it's kind of playing with fire to use a high pick on Jacob deGrom, but the upside is potentially winning your league if he is able to throw enough innings. So deGrom was 4. I had Burns 5. I agree with all the things that you said. If he has another year like he did last year, he certainly is worthy of the number one rank. But for me, 1 year of 167 innings isn't enough to rank him that high. Okay. And then 6, 7, and 8 in this tier for me are Woodruff, Bieber, and Wheeler. Bieber is a little risky, but everything that I read said that he's back, and when he is back, he's phenomenal. Wheeler I'm a little nervous to rank Wheeler where I did because he really hasn't been a superstar until last year. And Woodruff is just, to me, is another one of those, another one of the Milwaukee kind of, rub a genie lamp and come up with a top 10 in the major league starter. He was amazing. This was his first season of 121 of more than 121 and 2/3 innings, and he threw 179.1 innings last year. So again, not that he's shown injury risk, but to me, when you have that kind of workload, I wonder, even if he doesn't get hurt next year, are his innings going to be less effective because of the wear last year? We'll see. We'll see. So who are your next 4 or 5 starters?
Woodruff, Wheeler, Nola, and Alcantara.
Let's have the Alcantara debate, because he seems to be a lightning rod amongst a lot of fantasy players right now. I know that a lot of people are ranking him kind of almost a mid to low second round pick in 15 team formats. For me, I had him all the way down at SP11, below Urias, Webb, and Nola. What do you see in Alcantara to rank him that high?
For for what I'm looking at, he has legitimate 4-pitch mix. He has 4 pitches that he throws. Let's see, I wrote this down. Look at my notes. 4 pitches that he throws over 20% of the time. As you mentioned with Bueller, not too many pitchers. They have maybe 3 pitches in a show me pitch or something like that. So that sort of mix with a ground ball lean and his batted ball profile, premium velocity. His swinging strike rate was actually better than the guys above him. So I have Woodruff, Wheeler, Nola above him, but he actually underperformed his K rate. His swinging strike rate is actually better than theirs. And he's a developing pitcher. He's still working on refining his arsenal. And as he made those adjustments as the year went on, he got better and better. Despite those evolutions, he was still very consistent. The only pitchers who were more consistent than him were Cole and Wheeler and Bueller. But other than that, he was in the 90th percentile. So his K minus BB is only 18%. A lot of that's due to the fact that earlier in the year he was not getting strikeouts. But again, as he continued to evolve his pitch mix, those Ks started to come up. So I see him as an ascendant pitcher coming into his prime with a really robust pitch mix. I don't like the team he plays for, but I don't know. When I'm going by strikeouts, walks, velocity, pitch mix, control, and he's just checking all those boxes for me.
Wonder if one of the things that made me nervous about Alcantara is his lack of strikeouts, right? Mm-hmm. So, and as you touched on, he had a 24% strikeout rate, which was 8.8 strikeouts per 9, so just under 1 strikeout per inning. I wonder if because his swinging strike rate wasn't bad at 13.3%. So what I wonder is if he was throwing his sinker with 2 strikes, right? Because his sinker only got his 18% whiff rate on his sinker last year. So I wonder if with 2 he would get 2 strikes and then go to the sinker and get hard contact from it. From a fantasy standpoint, I don't see him getting very many wins. I don't think Miami is going to be even a 500 team. I don't love their bullpen. I could see them giving up some wins with him leaving with the lead. I also don't like their defense, right? They're talking about maybe Avisail Garcia in center. They talk about, or they have Jazz Chisholm was going to be the full-time second baseman, he's a below average defender at second. Miguel Rojas is a decent defender at shortstop, but he'll be getting up there in age. There are things about the periphery of Alcantara's profile that make me a little bit nervous. And he had a plus run value with his fastball, and his slider was just about even as far as run value goes. And so his slider was his sinker was the one pitch that was lights out. It was the number 3 ranked slider in baseball as far as run value at -15. And
sinker or slider?
A sinker.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did I say slider?
You did.
Yeah, sinker is what I meant. So it's a number 3 sinker in all of baseball, and the number 21 overall pitch from a run value standpoint. And so I like him because I think sinker ball pitchers aren't trying to throw the ball quite as hard most of the time, even though he averages 97.6 on the sinker. I think he's not as much of an injury risk as some other pitchers can be. But the ceiling on a sinker slider pitcher on a bad team, right, without a great defense behind him is not the same ceiling, I think, as it is for a strikeout pitcher with a good defense. And so I tend to, and then I add the fact that his current Fantrax ADP is 34.7. And so if I'm choosing between taking Sandy Alcantara or an offensive player at pick 34, I'm going to always go with the offensive player. If he was more of like in the 55-60 range, then I think that would be a much better price to pay. But you're right. He changes pitch mix, less fastball, more slider, more changeup. He basically got rid of his curveball. And I think he's tinkering and understanding that he has a great arm and he has a ton of ability. So it would not surprise me if he repeated what he did last year. But I do think that because he's not a high strikeout pitcher and because you can see variability in batting average and BABIP with pitchers that put the ball on the ground all the time, I think we could also see him become more of an SP2 or an SP3 next year. To me, there's a wide range of outcomes that could come with Alcantara, and certainly not worthy of the pick 35 for me. He was actually my faller. Who else did you name there? Wheeler. So you think Wheeler's 2021 is what we're going to see next year?
I had him up here because he rated out well both on stuff and location, and he's projected for a good workload.
Mhm.
As I mentioned with Alcantara, his swinging strike rate, he and Woodruff both don't have exceptional swinging strike rates. They're very good, but they're not exceptional. Both of them actually overperformed their K rate a little bit based on the swinging strike rates that they had.
Mhm.
But when I looked at his Savant page, he has premium spin on the fastball. So he has that ride on his fastball, and so as a result, he's limiting hard contact very well. So I do worry about the volume, but at the same time, in this range, to me, if I'm going to spend this much of a pick, that volume is important
Mhm.
because I can get guys at a lower. You can find talented players much lower who are not going to pitch those innings. So if I'm willing to pay that premium and draft someone up in this range, the innings, the track record, and at least the exhibited ability, kind of like you spoke to with Wheeler, to pitch and take on that volume is important. So I don't underestimate that with Wheeler. So
Mhm.
I don't think he'll be as good as he was last year. But again, I didn't see anything in the skills that said that he's due for a step back or gave me pause. And I do expect him to, if healthy, get the ball and post those innings, which again, that's part of what you're paying for up here is that volume.
Well, that's what makes me a little bit nervous about, Woodruff, Peralta, Burns, some of those lower lower volume starters is a pick this high. You're hoping for, you're expecting 180 to 200 innings, right? And Wheeler is that guy who will continuously start, doesn't have a history of injury. He also has 3+ pitches, which I really like. I like to see that kind of variety in an arsenal with a pitcher this high. It means that if one of the pitches isn't working, he can go to the others.
Mm-hmm.
And someone like Julio Urias has 2 pitches instead of 3, right? And so if one pitch is not working that night, he tends to struggle. But I see the same concern with Wheeler. I could see his ERA tick up to like the mid 3s, which is where he sat for the rest of his career. He did make some changes in his repertoire last year. He threw a little bit harder. He threw a lot more sliders, and he threw fewer changeups and scrapped his split finger. And so when I see those sorts of pitch mix changes, it's a little bit more encouraging, right? That these results are results that can be maintained. I hate the park. Philadelphia is just a shit park for pitchers. And so that makes me a little bit nervous, but I don't know that I could take him at pick 31, which is his current Fantrax ADP. But I like his skill set a lot. And I think he's a really great pitcher to build around. If he's a keeper, right? In our league, if you were keeping Wheeler, it's a great SP1 to start with for sure. Cause he gives you innings, hopefully wins, 200+ strikeouts. He's pretty much a shoe-in. Wins aren't guaranteed, but I see him as a shoe-in like 13 to 16 wins. All right. So the next group for me, I have, I guess it starts with number 9. I have Urias, Logan Webb, Aaron Nola, Sandy Alcantara, and Freddie Peralta. That's up to number 13. This was really interesting for me because I really wanted to like Julio Urias. I've loved him as a prospect ever since he was kind of buried in the BP, on the farm sort of reports when he was really young. He's a really fun pitcher to watch. But what I found was, well, one, he's ranked this high, I think in part because he had 20 wins last year. And while he pitches for the Dodgers, great park, great offense, wins are variable. We don't know. We can't predict wins, right? I also saw that he has 2+ pitches with his curve and his change. His curve was the number 2 curveball in baseball based on run value, and his change was the number 9 changeup. But if he loses any velocity on his fastball, I think he becomes a real life like number 3 starter, and a fantasy probably number 3 starter as well. So he averaged 94.1 miles an hour on his fastball, and he threw it 47.8% of the time. He had negative 48% average or movement, horizontal movement versus the average. So he threw it really up and down again. That Dodger philosophy of moving the eye level up and down. But he had very little extension, 5.6 feet of extension on his arm, meaning he's releasing the ball a little further away from the batter than most starters do. So if you think of like Randy Johnson, right, where it looked like he was releasing the ball right at the batter because he was 6'10". Urias is kind of the opposite, where the batter has that split second longer to actually identify the fastball. And batters hit 277 against the fastball last year. Now his XBA was 253, but the number that really scared me was they slugged 484 against his fastball, and the X slug was 464, so it was pretty close. It was actually the from a run value standpoint, the 316th fastball in baseball. So it's a below average pitch, and he's throwing it 47.8% of the time.
What kind of spin is he getting on it?
I can look that up real quickly if you give me 2 seconds.
Yeah.
His swinging strike was only 11.2%. So to me, he was playing with fire a little bit last year. You know, his BABIP was 272, and that's not for a fly ball pitcher. That's not, you can't really read too much into that. That's pretty average for a fly ball pitcher. But his xFIP was 373. So his xFIP was almost a run or higher than his actual average. All of those things, I wish him the best. I love Julio Urias. He's a pitcher I root for. I'm half Mexican. Like, I love rooting for Mexican pitchers, the whole thing. And he's 25, right? So you would expect that he may not quite be at peak, or he might be right at peak right now. But if he loses just a tick off the fastball and they hit 300 off of it instead of 277, the other pitches don't matter as much because they'll just wait for fastball if he can't get the change of the curve over. Yeah. Where do you have Urias?
12th. I was surprised to see his velocity, because I don't know if it's because he's left-handed or because he's just a good smooth athlete and doesn't look like he's throwing hard. I didn't realize he threw quite that hard. 94 from the left side it's actually pretty good velocity, and that's why I was curious about what kind of spin he's getting. Because it's, as you detailed, it's not a great pitch. Yeah, I had him down here because he didn't have, his swinging strike rate was obviously above league average, but when you're looking at the top pitchers in baseball, he doesn't stand out in that area. The thing he did really well last year is command the ball. He had the 3rd best walk rate on the pitchers I have on my list here tonight. So his command was really exceptional, and command tends to waver a little bit from year to year. So it's mostly because of his curveball, which is his plus offering. His stuff is good, and his command was really exceptional last year. And I also worried a little bit about the innings jump. Just 2 years ago, he was pitching out of the bullpen. So, I mean, all credit to him for getting his body and his arm to go that many innings last year. 185 innings is what I have him for. But you don't quite know how your body's going to respond going into that year 2.
Right.
Again, as you kind of spoke to Bueller, when you see someone that has that kind of build up and progression, you have a little bit more confidence of how are they going to come back, right. For that. So, but a few question marks. But yeah, obviously I love the command. I love the out pitch with the curveball. I love the team context, but with that swinging strike rate, again, looking down my list here, did he have the lowest?
I think of this.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
He did.
Yeah. So to me, being left-handed, majority of the batters in the MLB are right-handed, posting lowest. That's why I had him 12th, despite the season that he had.
I think So he had never thrown over 79.2 innings in a major league season. And last year he threw 185.2. So another one of those pitchers where you worry about the workload, right?
Yeah.
So that could take a toll on his fastball, which is the one pitch that he can't afford to lose velocity on. His spin on his fastball is 94, or his 94th percentile. So he did have,
Okay.
he did have a tremendous amount of spin on his fastball.
I wonder why it's getting hit so hard.
I don't know. I could see him as he gets older. I think he's smart enough, and the Dodgers are smart enough that, maybe they turn the fastball over and they turn it into a more of a two-seamer, and then maybe he throws a slider too. So he becomes more of a ground ball pitcher as he gets older. I don't know that would help the curveball as much, but I could see the Dodgers kind of changing his repertoire a little bit if the fastball starts to get hit, because the change in the curveball are such phenomenal pitches. But he's going to be an interesting one, because I think you see him go. I think we saw him go in TGFBI pretty high.
Yes.
On average, it was what, late second round, mid to late second round, I think, was where he was going. His ADP in Fantrax is 29.04. Again, as much as I love him as a pitcher in real life and want to root for him, there's no way I'm spending my 29th pick on Julio Urias. So Aaron Nola, we picked as our SP1 in TGFBI. I have him as, 8, 9, 10 as my number 11, just above Alcantara. What did you find with Aaron Nola? Did you find anything or learn anything more in diving into him?
No, I mean, all the things that we've spoken about on the pod are the reasons why I had him ranked where I had him at number 6. Just premium command, K minus BB was right up there. I mean, he's after Scherzer. He's the next after Scherzer. So he was 4th best. A lot of that is because he just doesn't walk people. Right. His swinging strike rate is 13. I had it at 13.7%. So it's actually quite good, but only walking at a 5.2%. So a K percent almost at 30, with great command and a track record of innings. We've already spoken to, the X stats and what they said about his year last year. Very consistent. So I had him as my number 6 pitcher.
I echo that. His ground ball rate was down last year over previous years by, I think, almost 10%. And so I worry about that a little bit in Citizens Bank Ballpark, just because it's a home run heaven for right-handed hitters. But his xFIP was 1.26 runs below his actual ERA. So I think his counting stats and his ERA tells a really different story than the quality of pitcher that he is, which is why we selected him as high as we did. But there are still some warning signs for me. His slider was, he was a 3 run value or plus 3 run value on the slider, which is a below average pitch, the 356 slug, and only a 16.4, this is a sinker, 16.4% whiff rate. And then he surrendered a 522 or 471 slug and a 522 X slug on his fastball last year. And he threw that 37.5% of the time. And it ranked as the 101st fastball as far as run value goes in baseball. So what I like to see out of a starter typically is a fastball that you can build upon. We all understand that establishing a fastball and fastball as strike one is kind of the easiest route to pitching success. And I know that Nola has great control and has the guile to be able to work with a less than great fastball. But it's a profile that, unless you're Greg Maddux, is I think difficult to maneuver without that overpowering stuff. So I'm confident in picking him where we did in TGFBI, but I do think there's a little bit more variability in his profile than I would typically want to take on. We got him at value. I think we got him 10 picks above or 10 picks below ADP. So that made sense. And then the last pitcher in that tier for me is Freddie Peralta. I know you love Freddie. I'll let you take Freddie on if you like.
That's okay. I didn't have him on my list, so
You got him
you're
in top
welcome.
16. So Freddie, from run value standpoint, number 3 fastball in baseball and the number 7 pitch overall. That was a little surprising for me to see. I understood his success, but I didn't realize his fastball was that good.
Okay.
Because it averaged 93.4 miles an hour. He threw it 51.6% of the time. Again, same philosophy where he's throwing the fastball up and down and not side to side or with a horizontal movement. He got good. He's 5'11". He got a 7 foot extension on the fastball, and I think that speaks to part of why he was so successful, even though he's averaging 93.4 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Hitters hit 156 against his fastball last year.
They
So
just don't see it. Yeah.
imagine there's got to be a ton of deception there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine you have a pitch that where hitters are hitting 156 and you're throwing it more than half the time. So they're not solving it, even though he's throwing it in volume. At a 31% whiff rate on the fastball. So this is a pitcher that typically I would like to build off of, because he's got that fastball that he's establishing over and over and over again, which makes the rest of the pitches a lot easier to throw. So slider got a -5 run value. Curveball got a -7 run value. He's a 17th ranked curveball in baseball. What I like about him too is he's got such a difference in velocity from pitch to pitch. So his curve is averaged 76.8 miles an hour. His slider averaged 80.5 miles an hour, and his fastball 93.4. That's almost 20 miles an hour difference between the curve and the fastball. He just, to me, sounds like a pitcher that I would not have any interest in facing. The one pitch I wish that he could develop a little more is his changeup, because I think a changeup that would dive low and away from a left-handed batter would make him even that much more deadly. Again, he's another one who he had 144 and a third innings last year, and he had never pitched more than 85 innings in a big league season. Makes me pretty nervous about his stamina and fastball next year, but his stuff is incredible. And he's, as you mentioned in a previous podcast, he's one of I'd say like a top 3 starter to watch in baseball as far as excitement goes. He was also a former Mariner farmhand, which makes me really sad. But Freddie
I didn't know
Peralta,
that.
yeah, he's pretty badass. He's pretty badass.
When he was in the pen, they called him Fastball Freddy because that's all he threw.
That's awesome.
And he's still there. He still got people out.
I love it. So the last 3 for me are Robbie Ray, Lucas Giolito, and Joe Musgrove. I don't have a ton to say on those guys. They're all 3 of them. I expect to throw 180 innings. Giolito is interesting to me in that I don't know if he's overrated in fantasy eyes because of his prospect pedigree or what it is, but his current Fantrax ADP is 36.98. So that's kind of mid to high 3rd round, which seems a little high for me to pick him there. He had a 3.53 ERA last year and a 3.75 xFIP. He seems a little bit more like an SP2 to me. The metrics behind his changeup and slider are really nice, though. He's another one whose fastball is pretty average, and then the other 2 pitches are really good. Robbie Ray makes me nervous because he had a 90% left on base percentage last year, which is incredibly high and way above average. But playing in Safeco or pitching in Safeco and being able to strike batters out, I think he's going to be just fine. And the last one that I think is worth covering for me, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, is I had Logan Webb at 10. And I have to speak a little bit about him because I just talked about how Sandy Alcantara's ranking to me was a little bit too high in general. And they're both sinker ball pitchers. But I think Webb has some of those surrounding characteristics or peripheral characteristics that make him better. So San Francisco doesn't have on paper, never has the greatest offense, but always comes through, always wins, right? They've got a great pitcher's park to pitch in. He's got a really good defense behind him. Plus center field defense, Brandon Crawford at short. And I like the fact that he's not a high velocity pitcher, and he's not a max effort guy, that he can throw his sinker over and over again. And it historically, those pitchers have not injured themselves quite as often or as extreme as a 100-mile-an-hour pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
And as I dug into Webb, what I found I really, really liked. He's 25 years old. He was a 4th-round pick in 2014. He's from Northern California. He's the number 6 sinker in baseball last year. He had 31.7 inches of drop on his sinker on average. So sinker was dropping almost 3 feet, which is nuts to me. His slider was a way above average pitch, and his changeup was also an average to slightly above average pitch. His K minus BB was 20.5. He had a 1.11 whip, 12.4% swinging strike rate is good, not great, but it's important to remember that he's a sinker ball pitcher. So if he's getting a ton of ground balls and he's getting a lot of swinging strikes, I see him being able to continue his success of last year and being a durable arm with a good defense and a good park. I think he's has a good chance of repeating the 3 ERA that he had last year. His xFIP actually last year was 2.79. And his ADP is 59.52. So as an example, if we compare Logan Webb to Sandy Alcantara, we have a 59 ADP and a 34.7 ADP, right? So you're saving 25 spots in the draft by taking Webb over Alcantara. Do you have any, what were your thoughts on Logan Webb without looking into him? Like, what did you think of him watching him at the end of last year?
He seemed to be quite, seemed to be like on a hot streak for sure. He was just completely in command of all of his pitches, and just couldn't seem to do any wrong. Every time he needed a ground ball, he got one. If he got a strikeout, he got one. So he certainly finished the season on a high note. It's funny that you use the term reliable with him, because I think he, to me, is one of the bigger health risks. And he has a history of shoulder problems. So yeah, it's we'll just agree to disagree on this one. From a bat ball standpoint, I see why you would compare them, but I'll take the extra vortex and velocity, the extra percent of swinging strike rate. And I think Sandy is built to take on the volume and doesn't have the health track record history. So, but Webb is an interesting pitcher on the rise, and I hope my concerns and the concerns about his health are behind him.
I think if
Webb he seems like
if he was a little older, I'd be a little more worried about the health risk. But I do think that there is some figuring it out at 24, 25 years old that may not happen for you at 27, 28. The other thing about him is he's such an extreme ground ball pitcher, right? He was 60.9% ground balls last year. And if you couple that with a 26.5% K rate, I like those two things in combination. So while Alcantara throws a power sinker and gets 50% ground balls, there is a difference between a 60 and a 50% ground ball pitcher. That does leave room for variability from a base hit standpoint with Webb, though, which makes me a little bit nervous. But I like him. He's someone that I would buy, and he's someone that I would be excited to have on my team. Who are at the bottom of your top 16?
10 through 16 for me are Darvish, Morton, Urias at 12. We talked about at length. Musgrove at 13. Eovaldi at 14, which is who was not on your list. Cease at 15 and Webb at 16. Cease and Webb are the only ones I made exceptions for at the bottom of my list for some of my criteria. Cease has below average command. He was the only person I allowed to be on this list who had below average command. And then Webb I put on there even though he only had 148 innings last year and is only projected for 166. So my list, I cut off anybody who didn't pitch 160 last year.
Will you share, or would you mind sharing a little bit of your the criteria that you use
Yeah,
that you speak of?
for sure. So for me, again, innings was my first filter. I didn't want to consider anyone. This is strictly redraft, by the way. And this, a challenge for me, honestly, I'm a dynasty player with Tino. So it's hard for me to get out of that mindset of trying to build a pitching staff year over year. But anyway, attempting to do that, and from a redraft perspective, and thinking about ranking these guys, innings to me is important. So I didn't rank anybody who didn't have at least 160 innings last year. And then I'm looking at command and control. So their stuff ratings and their control. I didn't consider anyone who had below league average stuff or below league average command, with the exception of Cease on his command. And then third filter me is K minus BB. And we talked about that last time. It's the number one thing a pitcher controls. We're putting guys on base and strikeouts and walks. It's an old school stat, but to me, if you look at the top guys who we talked about, like Cole's K minus BB is 28%. Scherzer's is 29%.
Right.
So it foretells dominance. It foretells, and so when I'm looking at trying to make decisions between guys, I'm going to give the guy a nod if he's more dominant in that area, because it not portrays, but kind of foresees dominance or potential dominance. And the last thing I looked at was Sierra. Trying to filter out last year's results, but just looked at Sierra. So as I go down my list, the Sierras tend to get higher. So skills independent ERA. So those are the 4 filters I use, and just I didn't really look at ADP. I didn't really look at name. I did look a little bit at auction value, but that was like my fifth tiebreaker. Just try to take a step back and take the names off and look at those criteria. And that's how Eovaldi sneaked on my list. He's not a pitcher I would necessarily look to be on here, but he had a 105 6 stuff and 106 command. There's very few pitchers that have that combination. Premium velocity, he had the lowest walk rate of anybody on here, as I mentioned before. Command can be variable a little bit from year to year. He's 2.5 years removed from his last surgery. He was very consistent last year. So his K minus BB was 21%, and he posted 180 innings last year, and finished the season healthy. So 25% K rate.
So real quickly, how do I phrase this? If I'm watching Eovaldi pitch, I see him throwing 100 miles an hour consistently. I also see it as being really straight. Mm-hmm. Is that taken into account with something like Stuff Plus, where yes, he has, because that pitch, I've seen that pitch get hit a ton. And so when I think of Eovaldi, I know that he's had some really great starts and has been pretty clutch for the Red Sox over the last couple of years. But he's not a pitcher that comes to mind just based on the eye test for me. He's a pitcher with premium velocity, but it gets hit pretty hard at times. How do you, I guess what I'm asking is, how do you reconcile some of the things that you see or some of the impressions with the eye test with some of the filters that you use to determine this list?
I try to take it out of account. Like for this exercise, I try to take it out of account. I mean, otherwise, like Walker Buehler would have been a lot higher, sure, for me, to try to take my favorites out of there. But I mean, Eovaldi, in terms of what you asked me about stuff, like absolutely the quality of each pitch and then the pitch mix is what generates the stuff. So I would guess his four seam, despite its velocity, is probably about an average pitch. Mm-hmm. But he's developed a pretty deep repertoire, and so he's able to use that velocity to keep guys off balance. But I've certainly seen a couple of games this year where he got knocked around pretty good, and there were times where Corey left him in too long as well, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But his Sierra was 3.6, and that's the same as Dylan Cease, better than Joe Musgrove, better than Julio Urias, the same as Charlie Morton. So just looking at what he posted over 180 innings, he just had a really good year, and I think he can repeat it. So I don't think he's valued or drafted anywhere near these guys, but I think you can get him as your number 3 starter, and I think he's getting quite a steal actually based on these metrics.
Right, absolutely. So he threw real quickly on his fastball. He threw it 42.3% of the time, It averaged 96.8 miles an hour. Batters hit 312 against the fastball last year. His XBA was 265, and his slug was 468. His X slug was 401. And he had a 19.4% whiff rate against or with the fastball, and the run value was -2, which makes it a just slightly above average pitch, but considering the volume that he threw it, it was pretty much an average pitch down the middle. But super interesting because he that's one of those times for me where I see something and I hadn't dug into it yet, and I want to see if what I remember watching on television was actually what the values play out to be after looking. I'm not debating that he should be ranked there. I think that's totally justifiable, but it is interesting to walk through that exercise given the amount of numbers that we look at and spit out week to week.
Yeah,
cool.
And a lot of it was just because I filtered out guys who, for the reasons I mentioned. So there's some talented pitchers below him, like DeGrom and Bieber and Freddie, who we just talked about, who have their issues, be it health or command, who I didn't consider top tier starters but they're probably better pitchers than him, But
it's
thinking about trying to build a redraft team and a certain amount of stability, safety, innings,
Well, and I think there's a difference too in like a 12-team redraft versus a 16-team redraft, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Right. In 16, you're looking for innings. 16, you're looking for the Eovaldes because you need innings and you need to rack up strikeouts, and innings are hard to find. Whereas in a 12-team league, you can shoot for the stars because you've got pitchers on waivers who you can pick up, who will give you some bulk if need be. So I do think it's important to specify and talk a little bit about the difference between those two. Were there any other starters you wanted to talk about on that list?
Go down here. We didn't really talk about Joe Musgrove. He's an interesting, possibly ascendant player. I know Eno is really high on him. What I see is someone who his stuff score is actually quite good. It's by the metrics the same as Walker Buehler. The velocity is not quite as good. It's 93, and his command is just league average. But he posted 180 innings last year. The CRA was 3.69. And he has a very low projectional standard deviations. That means that he doesn't have much risk in his profile. So I ranked him here in the bottom of my rankings. Again, that's a really strong SUP number. So that's telling me he has a developing deep arsenal. And if he can improve his command, which again, command fluctuates year to year a little bit. Coming off 180 inning season, he did wear down a little bit last year. So hopefully he can maybe sustain what he did in the first half to 2/3 of the year through the whole year. You might get up with a top 10 top 10 starter, outside of the top 10 quite easily. So he's just an interesting player. I was never kind of a fan of him. I got fatigued with him because every year people will call him out as a sleeper. This is like going back to like 2018, 2019. People saw some of the skill that he had and they kept calling for the breakout. So I got a little bit fatigued. But he really put it together last year. And so, and now I think he doesn't, outside of Eno, I don't hear a lot of people talking about him. So he's an interesting player for me.
I like him a lot. His profile is super interesting. So he throws 4 pitches between 19% and 27.7% of the time. So he's got a true 4-pitch arsenal. Throws a cutter, a 4-seamer, a curveball, and a slider. According to run value, his cutter and his 4-seamer were almost exactly average, and his curveball and slider were phenomenal. Run value for his curveball last year was -17, which without pulling it up, I think probably ranks somewhere in the top 15 to 20 as far as overall pitches in the major leagues. And his slider was a -12. And between those two pitches, he threw him 51.5% of the time.
Hmm.
So lots of breaking balls, incredibly effective breaking balls. But his four-seamer last year, he surrendered. They hit 316 with a 570 slug against the four-seamer. His XBA and his X slug were a little bit less than that. But it's pretty obvious that with, if he's working with those two great breaking balls, if he can figure out how to throw a pitch with more velocity, with a little bit more effectiveness, he could be a top 10 starter next year. And I think that's what Eno was talking about. And that's why we drafted him in NFBC where we did.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a gamble, but those two breaking pitches are awesome. He's another one who's really fun to watch because his breaking pitches are so good. He makes hitters look really, really silly. So that's Joe Musgrove is a fun one for sure.
Yeah. And Cease is a mystery box, but and look at his as attention. Look at signs, or you're trying to find guys who could be ascended. His swing strike rate was fourth in this category. Fourth in this group.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes Burns, Scherzer, Gosman, your favorite player, and then Cease. So I mean, he's fourth. Fourth in swinging strike rate. Velocity is there. The K percentage last year was 31.9, so basically almost 32%. So he was one of only 4 pitchers to post a K percentage over 30%.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the way he finished, he finished getting better. And after post crackdown, his stuff score went up. So I think he was working on some things. So yeah, I just had to put him here. 165 innings last year.
Right. He has 3 pitches with an above 40% whiff rate. So his curveball is a 40.5% whiff rate. His changeup had a 47.7% whiff rate, which is crazy for a changeup. And his slider was 50.1. And he threw a slider 30.6% of the time. So let's see, quick math, 53.2% of the time he threw a pitch that had a 40+% whiff rate. Like that's absolutely incredible stuff. And that's not even mentioning the fastball that averaged 96.7 miles an hour. He didn't have a single pitch that had a negative or less than average run value. So his curveball was the worst as far as run value goes at 0. But to me, he screams breakout potential. Yeah. He screams 2022 breakout. He had 226 strikeouts in that 165.2 innings last year. And he pitches in a division that doesn't have a ton of good offenses on a team that's going to score a lot of runs. I hate to do the who's the next Robbie Ray thing, but if we were to pick the next kind of breakout Cy Young Award winner, Dylan Cease is not a bad bet.
Yeah.
I love him. I love him. And I was thrilled that we were able to get him in both NFBC and TGFBI. It was very cool.
Cool. All right.
So I expected us to have some different pitchers. I love when we don't agree and when it's that extreme.
We can do an Alcantara Webb. We can
do a board bet.
A board bet on that one.
What do you want to? Are we doing it based on Fangraphs WAR? What are we doing it based on?
How does Fangraphs calculate that?
Oh, you know what? Here's the best way. We'll just do it based on the 5 categories. So whoever wins the most roto categories.
Okay.
Great. So Logan Webb versus Sandy Alcantara.
That's right.
Awesome. Now, from a more of a fan and emotional standpoint, do you have a favorite SP1 on your list? Like one that you just root for the most, or that's your favorite pitcher on that list, and why?
My favorite pitcher on this list is Walker Buehler.
I was going to say besides Buehler, but go ahead. We all know that.
I really feel like Matt should be here for this part. He's the one player that I drafted in our startup who actually made it to the majors and is dominant at his position. So, you can't help but I've just watched so many of his starts, and you just kind of stick with that guy. And to your point, you spoke to it very well. I learned a lot about his arsenal, and I just watch it. I don't necessarily dive into his metrics and data because I don't have to.
Mhm.
Outside of the drafts I've done with you this year, I haven't done redrafts for years, so it's like he's already on my team, so I don't necessarily have to study him. But you see that mix when he's on the mound. He can do all different kinds of things with the baseball. But he also is a fastball first pitcher, and I love that. He's super competitive on the mound. Um, expects a lot of himself, and I like guys that go out there and compete, and they expect themselves to be great.
Mhm. I
So
don't
yeah,
know. Do you know why he went? I think he went 24th in the first round out of Vanderbilt. Do you know why he went? Yeah, pick 24 of the 2015 draft. Did he develop more of a fastball or more command once he was in the Dodgers organization? Do you know that history at all?
I believe he went later in the draft because he was injured.
Ah, okay. Oh, you're right. I remember that now. I remember that now. They had to wait, I think, for him.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, I think out of all the pitchers that I studied for this pod, he was the one that stood out the most to me. He was the one that I was most surprised by, and if I was to predict who was going to be number one next year, it would be Walker Buehler above Cole and above Scherzer. Um, my favorite pitcher to watch in this group is Julio Urias. Um, I was a kid when Fernando Valenzuela pitched for the Dodgers. My grandfather was a Dodgers fan growing up. For me growing up, I think I spoke of this, I had to call him when the Dodgers were on Saturday game of the week. So I've always rooted for Urias to be a great pitcher. I don't like what we saw with his fastball, like we talked about,
Hmm.
but also a competitor, and he really did carry the Dodgers quite a bit last year.
Yeah.
And he's a tough dude. He has like a bit of a drift eye that has been operated on, and being able to pitch with a little challenged eyesight, and I think growing up with that sort of like physical difference is he's had to overcome some things to get to where he is, and I admire that. I always root for those kinds of players. I don't know a ton about Robbie Ray. I'm super excited to learn about him as a Mariners fan. And then the other one is Webb. I don't know what it is about Logan Webb that I took to in watching him down the stretch last year, but there's something about him that I'm really excited to watch next year. The others are almost so dominant that the ones above those guys are so dominant that it's almost hard to root for them unless they're on your team, fantasy or otherwise, right? Like
It's kind of true.
like Garrett Cole is like the Death Star. He pitches
Yeah.
for the Yankees, who I can't stand,
Right.
and he also pitched for the Astros. When he pitched for a team that I could root for him on, the Pirates, he pitched like shit, based on his pedigree.
It's true. It's true.
So that kind of guy, I can't do. Scherzer has warmed himself up to me with his public alcohol consumption. I appreciate that. When they asked him about what he did to celebrate the strike, the lockout being over, he said he just drank a lot, which I thought was pretty funny. I think he's at this point, he's just like he's a dude, he's a father. He's just like we are. He's just kind of at that point of his life where he's confident and he just kind of lets it go. And I admire that quite a bit. And it'll be interesting to see, I don't know how much attention the general baseball viewing public paid to the three Milwaukee starters. But I think now that they have a year of elite innings under their belt, it'll be interesting to see how much publicity and airtime they get, given what they did last year. Also gives me pause in not drafting Ashby, given what we see from that organization with regards to pitching. Interesting organization. So the last question, as far as SP1s go, do you have a favorite prospect currently in the minor leagues that you see as a potential SP1?
Tino, I copped out on this question.
Uh-huh.
I have four four players who are young
Mhm.
but in the majors. I know that I got lucky with Matt is texting me and it's dinging in my ear really loud. I'm super sorry. That's
You
why
know,
I'm so distracted.
me too. He
Yeah,
just
breaking
texted that
apparently we have breaking news or something.
Josh Donaldson to the Yankees.
Okay.
And then Nelson Cruz just signed with the Nats. Oh, wow.
Okay.
So Yankees acquired Josh Donaldson, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa from the Twins for Gary Sanchez and Gio Urshela. Huh. We finally get an interesting trade.
Yeah,
Like
finally.
it. What do you think?
Damn it. I knew we should have took Hinkagawa, man.
At first glance, what do you think?
Say it again.
At first glance,
No, say the players again.
Josh Donaldson, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa to the Twins for Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez.
So Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez go to the Twins.
Yes.
Go to the Twins. And then Connor Palefa, who they just got, is going to the Yankees along with Donaldson.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing the salary difference between both sides is probably close to $20 million.
Going to the Yankees. Yeah, given Donaldson's contract.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So Donaldson, go ahead.
It seems on brand for the Twins to play Urshela at third. And then
Right.
they got their catcher. They got a catcher back to replace Garver.
Right. I don't know that. Are you excited? Would you be excited about Gary Sanchez as a Twins fan?
No, I would not.
I do wonder.
But I mean,
is he a change of scenery guy though? Right. The talent's there to be a good hitter. We saw it.
right.
I think if the Twins are looking to get out from under Donaldson's salary and they see Sanchez as a 1-for-1 with Garver, which I'm sure that's what they would say, you just acquired a catcher with a lot more upside. And
a lot more track record of being on the field as well.
Right. And he's getting beat up by the New York media and the New York fans like year after year. He's their punching bag. He's a chance I would take. I'm not a fan of Kiner-Falefa. I think he's great. He's great defensively at short. And I think that's probably where he should play is he should be a shortstop for 150 games if you believe in a defense only player. But he's probably just keeping the seat warm for Volpe, and then he'll be a utility guy once Volpe is a major leaguer. And Donaldson in New York is just typical Yankees.
Yeah.
What I don't get is, are they just going to have a lineup full of right-handed power?
Yeah, probably.
Right? Station to station right-handed power. And then if you're New York, why wouldn't it be left-handed power given the way that their field is constructed?
So you think they'll play IKF at short and move Torres to second?
Yeah, I think Torres is bad at short.
Yeah, he is. I mean, is their lineup good enough where they can just take IKF's substandard bat and let him be plus defensive short because he is a plus defender.
I'm guessing that's what they do. The other thing they could do is play LeMahieu at second and Torres at short if they don't want defense, if they're looking for a little more offense. They'll probably mix and match LeMahieu at first base as well. It's hard for me to talk about the Yankees. I don't like the Yankees because of their history with the Mariners. I don't like the Yankees because of the arrogance of the fans. And if I was building a team, they've gone exactly the opposite way of the way I would build it. And what I love about baseball, they literally have Stanton, Judge, Donaldson, Gallo, right? They've got like 4 just all or nothing type of hitters.
Right.
Even Hicks is not like, is not a spring chicken or a fast player. He's a good defensive player. He hits for power and takes a walk, but they kind of almost have all one type of player. I don't know. It's an ugly team. It's a team I'm going to really enjoy rooting against.
Yeah. They have a hell of a bullpen though. It's the only soft spot I have for them.
They do.
And they
And
got my new favorite player, Clay Holmes.
we'll talk about him later. He's great, actually.
Yeah, I know, man.
Yeah, between Holmes,
Like,
Green, and Loizaga, they're pretty dominant in the bullpen. So that's fun. And then I think what I saw was that Nelson Cruz signed with the Nats. Is that right? Yeah,
yeah,
that's got to be a money grab. I can't see why he would want to go to the Nationals. Maybe to play with
yeah.
Juan Soto? I don't know. Like seriously, like he's not doing it to compete.
Right.
Huh, that's an interesting
I
choice.
heard it hurts I think that hurts Ruiz and Josh Bell a little bit.
Yeah,
There's not gonna be many DH at bats.
right,
We thought that you would project the way the roster was that, you know, Bell would have a chance to hit maybe 600 at bats.
right,
And maybe Ruiz might get to 450, 500,
right.
but I wouldn't think that's the case anymore.
I think, yeah, Ruiz probably goes from 425 to 425, 450 as far as plate appearances down to maybe 350, 400. And then Bell, they must be confident in Bell's defense though, enough to
He got a little bit better last year for sure.
but I don't know why, unless you're trying to change the culture of the team, because Cruz is a very good clubhouse guy and a great leader. I don't know why the Nationals would sign him. It's not like they're below the floor as far as salary goes. Interesting.
Yeah.
So back to starting pitching.
Yeah. So yeah, what I was
Wow.
saying was, coming off of the pandemic and then just the mess that minor leagues have been in, just trying to figure out, to me, pitching development is a lot different than hitter and batter, the way that the hitters come up. I mean, it's very sequential and they step up the ladders and their skills carry over and they build and they fail and they fix it. And pitching is just, it's not like that. Their arsenals have to develop. They have to develop physically. Almost all of them have an arm injury at some point in their career, whether it's early or later. And I think a lot of it's just about how do you take your talent and shape it,
Mhm.
and shape your arsenal. So trying to project which one of these guys in the minors is going to be a future number one. I mean, you might as well ask me what the lottery is going to be. I just have no idea until they get to the majors and I can see, we can get some StatCast on them and see some data. I just don't know what to tell you. So what I did instead,
Why is it Bobby
or what
Miller? Why is your
as
answer Bobby
I
Miller?
picked guys that are in their first or second year who I think in a year I would be surprised to see him in the top 15 or 20.
Mhm.
And that was Alec Manoah, Aaron Ashby, Michael Kopech, and then someone I think is being forgotten about is Dustin May.
Mhm.
Um,
Dustin
I'll
May's
start.
metrics are nuts.
I'm going to start there because if you pick up the narrative coming out of 2020 was, why can't this guy strike anybody out? Why can't this guy strike? He has this velocity, he has this insane movement, but he doesn't strike anybody out, so he's fantasy shit. Well, as I was just talking about with these young pitchers, it takes time for them to develop and command their arsenal.
Mhm.
Of what we started to see last year at the beginning of the year, before he unfortunately hurt his elbow, was he was starting to command and shape his arsenal, where his K minus BB was 33%.
Mhm.
He was still pitching at 98 miles an hour. He had a 4-pitch mix going. He had 4 pitches he was using at least 80% of the time. So we were seeing that arsenal take shape. We were starting to get the swing and miss, and he was starting to be pretty damn dominant.
His
And
metrics were like top 3 in baseball before he got hurt.
yes,
He was
so
dominant.
I want to nod to him because I just think that it's natural. You're out of the news cycle, you're hurt. But he will not be the last person to come back from Tommy John.
Mhm.
And by no means is it 100% everyone comes back, but it's kind of like knees in football, right? At some point you blow out your knee, they know how to fix it. The science is there, the medicine is there. Get them back on the field. These guys are healthy.
So
And
real
I
quick,
just,
fantasy question on May. Are you keeping him?
hell yes.
You are.
There's no way I'm letting him go. No way. Despite the injury.
So you're competing this year or not?
Hell yeah, I'm competing this year. I'm competing every year. Have you seen me punt ever? I don't know how to do
If you're
that.
keeping May, you're punting though, because he's not gonna I tried. Go ahead, keep going. Sorry, I tried.
So Michael Kopech, right now he has 2 pitches and 2 show me pitches. So this is all about arsenal development. So all these guys have to round out their arsenal, but from a raw, just from a raw tools perspectives, 15.3% swinging strike rate. His velocity is 97.5. His Sierra last year coming out of the bullpen was 2.7, and he had a 36% K rate. So again, it's about rounding out the arsenal and refining it. But the raw stuff that I see, the indicators, he's someone that I would be investing in.
What are the other two?
Aaron Ashby, and my other 2 is Aaron Ashby and Manoah. Aaron Ashby has 3 pitches he uses right now. He has 2 others he throws, but I think he needs to ditch one of his 3 and pick up one of the other ones. As one of the write-up that you did on your baseball thoughts, and I replied to, he has a pitch that's he needs to ditch, in my opinion. But anyway, we just talked about Milwaukee and their ability to refine and bring up these guys. So last year he had a 13.5% swinging strike rate. His velocity was 96.6. He has a strong ground ball lean, and his Sierra was 3.1 in his limited sample. So he's another one that I see that velocity from the left hand side. I see Milwaukee. I see the raw arsenal. Again, that needs refinement. He's someone that I would be betting on.
Ground ball plus swinging strike is a recipe for success.
Yes, I agree. And the last one's Manoah. For me, he has 3 pitches, he uses 20% of the time right now. He needs to develop his changeup to get lefties out. But his slider, I don't know where his slider ranks. You probably do, but his slider was one of the best in baseball last year. His ability to suppress hard contact and his XBA on that pitch is really, really good. So he has a pitch, he has an out pitch, he has a pitch to command that he can command. Eno always talks about slider command is huge. If you can command the slider, it's a huge building block. You and I prefer fastball, and I don't think I'm changing that, but slider command and slider is a really important pitch in today's MLB. So yeah, he has 3 pitches. The slider's dominant. Last year he posted a 14.3% walk or swing strike rate. His velocity is lower than I like to see, 93.4. But he was very consistent last year despite being a rookie. He posted a 90 in consistency. So he's another one that I see. Great team. And all 3 of these guys have great team contacts. They have good pitching development. And throw May in that mix as well with the Dodgers. So these are 3 young guys. They're not prospects anymore. So I failed on the question. But that's what I would bring in terms of young guys who I see as future SP1s as soon as next year, honestly.
Manoah, so to answer your question, Manoah, his batting average against his slider was 146. XBA was 150, slugging was 293, and X slug was 270. And but as a comparison for someone like Manoah versus what we talked about with Cease, Manoah got a 37% whiff rate against the slider and a 32.6 whiff rate against the fastball. And we talked about Cease having 40+% whiff rates. And it's not a knock on Manoah. This is to say that it's like it's throwing absolute BBs.
No, it's a great point.
But yes, that is a cop out. I'm waiting for let's say your top pitching prospect next episode. How's that?
I'll find one that I like. How's that?
that works.
I will. I promise I will. I will find one. I'll write down right now.
It begs the question though. It's baseball. We love numbers, obviously. And it's a way for us to filter and understand the game that we love. And we both have been looking at some form of baseball numbers or sabermetrics for 25 years now, right? I remember playing dynasty baseball with the cards and the dice and building my team based on OBP. This is pre-Moneyball, but I just thought about it. I'm like, the more runners I can have on base, the better, right? And it just made sense to me. And I love all of that. And I still love all of that. And I love how much it's developing and how quickly it's developing. But I challenge you a little bit in this idea that it's impossible to not impossible, but it's a difficult task to look at pitching and for the fan without access to StatCast to be able to evaluate starters. I think part of what's fun for me as a baseball fan is to look at pitching clips of, I look at fewer clips of minor league hitters because it's a little easier to predict hitting, I think, coming out of the minor leagues. But pitching is something that I think there's still a lot of opportunity to scout, right? You can look at pitching metrics, but you can't necessarily look at a delivery through the numbers. You can look at extension and those sorts of things, but when you see a delivery, like I think of Ramon Martinez's delivery, or Nolan Ryan, obviously, or Tom Seaver are two really easy ones, but Ramon Martinez just always felt like he was throwing, the old Dodgers starter, always Pedro's older brother, looked like he was just throwing effortlessly, right? Doc Gooden looked like it was an effortless delivery. And that's something that you can see in a minor leaguer, right? If they're throwing effortlessly, sorry, and they're throwing mid 90s and they have a breaking ball, right? That maybe they kind of can command, but not a ton. And they're dominating. And then you see like flashes of a slider. To me, that's enough to grab onto, or excuse me, flashes of a changeup, because that's what I meant. That's enough to grab onto, and I want to dig more. And of course, like you look at spring training StatCast numbers and you're digging and you want to know more, but it has to start somewhere. And from a fantasy perspective, the further we can get ahead of the other managers as far as rostering players who will have future, elite value, the better, which is the thought process around having 5 minor league spots in our league. And so for me, the starter that is of interest to me is an easy one for you to predict, I'm sure. But the starter that has the greatest upside, I think, and the greatest probability of becoming a number 1 starter is George Kirby. I know that most people have Shane Baz and Grayson Rodriguez above him. I think that most folks looking from the outside into the Mariners organization are looking at the number of innings that the Mariners pitching prospects are throwing and assuming health questions. I know they did that with Emerson Hancock this year, which is why he dropped off of a lot of top 100s. But the Mariners organizationally have this approach of throwing very few innings with their starting pitchers to start off with. It's a really slow burn. George Kirby was the 20th pick in the 2019 draft by the Mariners out of Elon, which is the same university that produced Jacob deGrom. He's 24 years old already, but he's got, have you watched Kirby pitch at all or any clips? So very like Kirby was built out of a storybook. He's 6'4", about 220. He was really skinny when he came out. He's put on good muscle, broad shoulders, just smoothest delivery you've ever seen.
Wait a minute, are you talking about Sandy Alcantara or George Kirby?
George Kirby's not throwing a 97-mile-an-hour sinker.
You just started talking about that perfect build. I just thought you were talking about Sandy. No, sorry, my fault.
George Kirby will always strike out more than 9 hitters per 9 as well. So clearly I wasn't talking about Alcantara. But the thing that separated Kirby coming out was that he had absolutely pinpoint command coming out. Mm-hmm. And he was seen as a middle rotation starter with great command, throwing kind of low to mid 90s. And with the nutrition and muscle that he's added, he's now like sitting 97, 98 with the same command that he had before. He's got a lights out, like plus curveball, and he's got a potential plus changeup as well. So he's got 3 pitches that are currently above average, 2 of them way above average, and a slider that's a little bit more, he has a little bit less control of, but also flashes plus. So the comp that I had for him was Shane Bieber, in that, Bieber, he has made his hay with velocity plus command. But the other one, as I'm talking about it, the other one that he reminds me of a little bit is Walker Buehler. When you're thinking about a prototype of a pitcher who has potentially 4+ pitches, right, and really good command, I think Buehler's command is plus, and Kirby's also, I think he may have more strikeout potential than less than Bieber, but a little bit more than Buehler. And then he's going to be pitching in a park in Seattle with, that is a really good pitcher's park with, as I said, with Logan Gilbert, a plus defense up the middle. And so to me, he's a potential ace. You're throwing 99 miles an hour with pinpoint control with other plus pitches is just, you don't find that. And his delivery is incredibly clean. So I have his fastball as a 65, his curve as a 60, his change as a 60 potential, and his slider as a 55. And I think his slider could potentially move up to 60 if he can command it. But you just don't find pitchers with that kind of control, or excuse me, that kind of command and that kind of stuff. If we look at our list, I don't know that outside of Buehler, I don't know that there is one to compare him to really. I guess Garrett Cole has 4 pitches that are plus, but different type of pitchers, obviously. But I could not be more excited about George Kirby. I can't wait to see him come up. I think the fact that he's 24 means that we will see him in the major leagues at some point this year. Maybe he becomes the Mariners bulk innings guy towards the end of the season. But super fun and super exciting. Obviously, Grayson Rodriguez and Shane Baz have quite a bit of potential. Baz with incredible stuff. Rodriguez too. I don't trust the Orioles' ability to develop pitchers, so I'm kind of holding out on Rodriguez. And then the other one for me is Hunter Green, and I don't know if that's an emotional addition to the list or if it's actual, but he has 2 plus pitches. Well, fastball's plus because it's 2 straight, but it's still 104 miles an hour. I like to dream on pitching, and I do still believe in the romantic version of scouting players, and that there is still value to watching players with your eyes and incorporating that into things like your rankings. And I know you do too. It's just it's more for me to challenge the way that we look at starting pitching. So next week when Matt's on the pod, we'll probably go in the opposite direction because Matt's all about evaluating young starting pitching in the minors still. Any thoughts on Kirby? Have you been able to watch him at all?
He was my favorite, has been my favorite of the Mariners pitching prospects. He's been often on my roster in the past because of that command.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started to add velocity. And to me, I didn't want to invest anyone at the minor league level unless they had command.
Right.
It's kind of like investing in someone who doesn't have a hit tool.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, I hear you push back, and you said all these wonderful things about Kirby, and it gets me excited to see him.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you're not keeping him.
I am.
Oh, okay. I didn't think he was on your list.
100% keeping Kirby. I'm actually keeping Kirby over, speaking of proximity, I'm keeping Kirby over Hunter Green.
Okay.
And Luis Patino. And you can tease me about competing this year, competing next year, but Kirby is one that I'm keeping for sure. I think his upside is too high. His upside is too high, and I need pitching in order to compete with you and Aaron Horn. That's kind of my weak spot. Do you have
a? Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
My journey with this league, trying to learn to play dynasty baseball, I've invested and kept young pitchers who are in the minors. Dylan Cease is a good example. He's on my list.
Mm-hmm.
I had him 3 years ago,
mm-hmm.
and he has all the same potential he has today in 2022 that he had then. The electric arm. Mm-hmm. It's taken him that much time to get to the point where he's on the precipice of being something special. Right. And when he came up those first times, like I absorbed all those bad ratios, and then you put him back down, and then you end up cutting him, or you invest in like a Tristan McKenzie, mm-hmm. and you hold him through the cut, through the off, and you don't keep a hitter over him, and he goes up and down, and he flashes and he goes back, and he's, or even a Patino, who I love Patino, mm-hmm. love watching him pitch. Mm-hmm. This is like heresy to say, but I get Ramon, I get it's the picture. I can see his face, so I can't think of his name. I'm just too tired. Red Sox 90s. I can't think of his name. Please
Pedro?
help me. Pedro, thank you. I get Pedro vibes when I watch him just because he's small and everything. And that's kind of heresy to say because Pedro is the GOAT.
Right.
But yeah, like owning him and like trying to hold him year after year, waiting for him to come up and reading about him and knowing like and seeing him in the futures game and seeing what he did and when he was in the futures game and like you're dreaming on it and like trying to hold that in dynasty. And that's where I've just kind of like stepped back and think like I want to wait till I get some before I make a commitment to these guys. I need to be investment in the hitting side on the minors and not in the because it's such a bumpy road.
Right.
But I respect the pushback because everything needs to be done in balance. And so punting all the way on it is not the answer either.
Right.
So there's a better balance that has to be found.
I think
and you know my love for pitching is genuine. But it's just like trying to find like how to calibrate that in this format.
Right.
And as we talk about in this pod, like this league is everything. You know, whether or not we win FBC or I win some roto league that you and I are in on ESPN, like that's all icing on the cake. But if I win Fantrax, forget about it.
Right. Right. You're doing a ticker tape.
Like, so it's all about like refining my approach, refining to like every minutia over this roster to try to win that league.
Right. I'm in the same boat. The year that I won, I was surprised and I felt like I could take risks after that because I had a ring, right? And there's nothing better than winning the league with your best homies that you've been in for a long time. The one thing I'd like to say about keeping minor leaguers and minor league pitching is what I found is I've cycled like you. I've cycled through a ton of players who I wish I would have kept, and a ton of players who I liked and then I cut and then they became stars, and we all go through that, right? What I found works for me is I have to apply. So you apply all your filters. You have this list of players that you really like that are a good fit for your team in the future. But then I have found that I have to be emotionally invested in the minor leaguer, to stick with them long enough to see their talent develop. Otherwise, they're just taking up a roster spot that I should be using for something else. And which is why I've carried Julio for like 2.5 years now, essentially, is I just knew like, I don't want, if this guy ends up being a superstar, I don't want to play in a league where I don't have the Mariners superstar. I just don't. And so I had to make room for him. And the more I learned about him, the more I loved him. And he just became that player that I was emotionally attached to. That's the only way I'm able to keep a player for that long. If like Christian Hernandez, I love, but he's not going to be up until 2025. So what is he doing on my roster if he can't help me, even if he has value? It's weighing those sorts of things. And this is something I've learned, I think, more recently. And then as far as pitching goes, I would take that idea of having to be emotionally invested in the player and multiply it by like 10, because pitching is like tin stap, right? There's no such thing as a pitching prospect. They get hurt. They're not as good when they come up. There's so much risk and so much variability in pitching that you have to be completely bought in to the guy and love the guy in order to make it worth keeping him on your team. And for me, the only two pitching prospects I really see that way are Kirby and Hunter Green. But it took this offseason to realize that I didn't feel that way about some of the others that are on my roster. So yeah, part of the fun for me is to dig into the numbers as much as we do and learn about the performance and try to predict the performance in the way that we do, and incorporating the new statistics that we learn about, whether it's on another podcast or just in our own research, but then still being able to sprinkle in the scouting or the emotional attachment or the knowledge that one of us has shared with one another about a particular player. It's fun to dig as deep as we are. And pitching is just scary. I can't wait to get into to SP2. Do you have an open?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting players in that tier.
The next tier?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some pitchers we love up here and there's a lot of top end talent, but I mean, it's kind of expected.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right,
We all know who the most dominant pitchers are,
right,
um, with little exception.
right.
Yeah, my open forums, given today is the unofficial official start of spring training, just outside of seeing Julio on the field, uh, is there anything you're specifically looking forward to or looking for in spring for your fantasy team or a specific player, um, that you'll be paying close attention to that particularly matters to you?
Yeah, I think Julio, of course, right? I'll be
I said that already. I
I'll
tried to
be
take
glued.
the answer away from you.
I'll be glued to that. Sorry. Hunter
You're
Green,
all right.
and with Sonny Gray being traded today to the Twins, Hunter Green has another spot open in that rotation. I think they're looking to go with Green and Lodolo in that rotation if they can. I'm still debating whether I want to keep Hunter Green or not, and so I'll be watching that. Interestingly, we talked about my trade for Tommy Pham, and where Tommy Pham lands will probably determine whether I keep him or not. I'm still considering letting him loose, even though I traded for him. But I like having that flexibility. I also think there's a lot of depth in the outfield that might be able to reproduce what I would get from Pham later on in the draft. So I'm looking at that from a fantasy perspective. I'm watching Ronald Acuna's health. Just came out today that he's looking at May as his return. And so for both both of our NFBC and TGFBI teams and my Fantrax team, we have Ronald Acuna. So he's another one. I'm going to be watching fan reaction to baseball being back. I think we tend to be in this bubble of, people that are excited for fantasy baseball and podcasts and our league and all of our enthusiasm, but the general public buying into baseball is going to continue to be important for baseball's longevity. And I will be paying attention to see if there's some negativity towards MLB because of the lockout. Outside of that, I don't look at spring training as much as far as trying to figure out who I want to draft. I look for, a big jump in performance or a big dip in performance in spring training. Sure, if their exit velo is off, that sort of thing. But spring training for me is about seeing the young guys play. If I'm watching the Mariners spring training game, like let's get those first 3 innings over and get the regulars out of there so we can see the Brandon Williamsons and the Matt
Yeah.
Brash and, is Hancock really hurt? And let's watch George Kirby dominate and Julio hit bombs. Like that's what's fun for me about spring training. And I am sad that I'm not going this year because I did go a number of years in a row. And it was the highlight of my year for the most part, was going to spring training in Arizona. How about you?
I have two. One is extremely selfish just because it's going to impact my team so much, and that's just looking for signs that something's different with Yelich.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, he's the only outfielder I plan on keeping, and I'm hoping that he can at least post like a 2015 type season, and make him worthy of that keeper selection. But
I did
if
hear
he,
in the collective bargaining agreement that if you hit the ball off home plate and it goes over the fence, that it counts for 2 runs instead of 1. So he may
well, thanks.
incredibly
There you go.
valuable this year.
So yeah, I'll be watching his launch angle and just to see how he looks and just look for reasons to believe,
Mhm.
I guess. So
Mhm.
just because it is such an important thing for my team. And then the other thing for me, I'll just be watching like pitching velocities and like when pitchers are used, trying to I'm just excited to have actual information from games to look at bullpen hierarchies, look at velocity differences for starters. I don't really pay attention to results, but I look at velocities,
Mhm.
and strikeouts and walks and that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to look at pitchers, um, specifically relievers, just because most of my starting rotations are already on my roster. So, but I'll be watching everybody pitching wise, but especially the bullpen to see what trends start to emerge there. And eventually we're going to draft something in Fantrax. So I'm excited to see that.
So my question for you is, do you still root for the Nats in the same way that you did?
No,
And why not?
the players that I really like are gone, and just organizationally, the things they did during COVID, not paying their minor leaguers, and then firing all their employees that didn't get the vaccination, and I just kind of felt like they showed who they were,
Mhm.
and that kind of, and I just wasn't proud to like wear that logo. And again, all the players that I when I really came back to baseball, and they had Strauss and Harper and Ian Desmond, and like those guys that I really liked, that kind of drew me to the team, like they're all gone.
Mhm.
I don't particularly like Soto. I mean, he's a great hitter, but I'm just not a huge fan of the way he carries himself. I mean, he's fine if that's your cup of tea. I don't have anything against him. He's just not my favorite.
Mhm.
So that's really it. And then again, when they handled the pandemic and their minor leagues, and I just kind of soured on it.
Do you have a rooting interest in a team now?
I don't. And when people ask me, and people, I mean, no, I love baseball. You see me carrying my forecaster around work and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And I just tell them, like, honestly, I just love the whole league, and I watch all the different teams, and it depends on like who's pitching that day, what I watch. And I mean, it's really true. I mean, I really do. Like, I would watch any game that's on that I could have access to, but um, there's no particular team that I'm married to. I'm kind of like interested in like trying to develop a fanship of the Pirates
Mhm.
because they're close to me and they're a young team. Um, and so yeah, I'm really interested. Just like if I can kind of be a first-hand witness of that team coming together, that would be because this is where I live now, and that's the team that's close by, and I'm really interested in a lot of their players. Like, I mean, I wanted Brian Hayes before, but after I moved here, especially, I'm like, I'm gonna go see Pirates games. I really want Hayes now, because I'm gonna get to go see him play. I liked him before, but like that really was a bigger deal once I moved here. I'm like, I really, really, really want him now.
Not to pour gasoline on the fire, but there were pictures of him today on Twitter uh, as a little bit more bulked up. And people were, everyone was joking about 30 home runs and him being a monster and whatnot. So that shape of life pictures are coming out about Brian Hayes right now.
I just hope his arm is okay, and his hand, and
Well, he would
I
also
really
he'd also benefit from the same Christian Yelich rule, I think. So we'll see,
whatever, man.
we'll see what happens. And from last podcast, the book that I was trying to remember about the Pirates transition towards a more analytical approach was written by Travis Sawchik, and it's called Big Data Baseball. And so he wrote about the year when the Pirates signed Russell Martin and baseball was up in arms and didn't really understand why they'd be signing him. And it was because they were ahead of the curve as far as pitch framing goes and some of the other softer metrics with regards to evaluating catchers, amongst other things. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. I wrote that down. I'm gonna get that book.
It's a fun one. The other fun one is, I don't want to promote Jonah Carey necessarily, but his book on the Expos is a really good read if you're looking for something to read.
Do you know what that's called?
I don't. I'll have to look it up. I have it, but I don't know
Jonah
what it's called.
Jonah Carey,
Yeah,
Carey.
K-E-R, K-A-R-I, K-E-R-I.
Okay.
Yeah. The other, so I'll answer both questions, I guess, at the same time. K-E-R-I. I'll be
You
watching.
already answered my open forum question. You already answered it.
I know I did. The Mariners, I'm so hesitant to be 100% all in because I don't want to get broken by them. But this looks like, depending on who we sign, this looks like the beginning of our, 3, 4, 5 year window to actually win a World Series. I know they put a competitive offer on Chris Bryant today, and they already had one out, but I think they put another one out for him. But spring training and regular season, I'll just be glued. I'll be glued to Mariners games. if they're playing, you know, I'll probably have to watch the game because of work. I'll probably have to watch the game after work. So later on, record it. But I'll turn all notifications on my phone off so that I can sit down and actually analyze and watch. And in spring training, I'll be watching every little detail. I'm a Michigan grad, and we won the national championship in '97. And I was actually there at the Rose Bowl, drove from Ann Arbor to Pasadena for that game against Washington State. And I thought that that was going to be the peak of my like sports fandom, essentially, like to be a student at a university that wins a national championship in football is pretty cool. And it was certainly like a top 5 highlight for me. But I've always said if the Mariners ever won a World Series, it's that times 10. It's my team. And so I'm trying to temper expectations. I think the team as constructed now, we'll watch in spring training, but as constructed now, they're probably a 86, 87 win team, I think. But I know they're not really going to go out and get more pitching. So we're kind of just going to lean on what we have. But if they say we signed Chris Bryant, right? And then I don't know why we would sign Seiya Suzuki, but I'd still love to have him. I don't know that he makes sense in terms of roster construction and what we have, but just Bryant, you know, on base guy, third base, 150 games, great defense. Not even to be great, but just to get on base and hit 24 home runs and hit 280, make all the difference in the world. So I'll be watching every pitch and kind of probably emotionally going up and down with every pitch with this team, but it's our time. So I can't wait for the first game.
Great. That's great.
So we'll cover SP2 next Sunday. If there's something that comes up with baseball we want to discuss, maybe we want to discuss the trade that we made in Fantrax midweek and put together a short pod. We may come out with that too. This was fun. This was awesome.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
I can't wait to learn more about the way in which you look at starting pitching, because I know that's your forte, that's your thing. Very cool.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good night. Thank you.